Don't remember. Yeah. Yeah. Where do you, I mean, sorry. Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But, yeah, I, so we have to go.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's.
Well, it's because water level. Water level. Actually, Shell Lake. Shell Lake is pretty, most houses. And it. Although, they did a little, basically posed. They said, well, we wanna limit how much we are bring of water. But there's not a lot, that's like, so they drink it in water. Well, I mean, it's.
Right.
But it was just a back. Water. They just did not. Then you have people. Basically voted. They're like. Oh, they didn't come. I know because man. Okay. Yeah, I was curious about.
No, are you good?
Yeah. Fine. Yeah. Yeah.
That's unfortunate. I really enjoy. So interesting, you know, it's all.
No, they don't.
Yeah, get your trees.
Yeah.
Good idea though. Yeah, huh? All right.
Well, I had.
Will you do an intro or something?
Yeah. I would- Do you have a preferred way to introduce yourself?
I love.
Just whatever Adam Swanson, local artist.
Okay.
Yeah, whatever else.
Okay, sounds good. I will keep it short and sweet to let you speak. But yeah, I wasn't sure if you had, you know,
Yeah, I prefer.
artist, muralist,
Yeah.
man of many talents. what
Well,
you prefer.
Yeah. I like artist, muralist, art, painter, you know,
Okay,
whatever,
sweet.
whatever.
I know this thing's like. I'm just not curious.
Cool. Yeah, we've got 10 minutes. So do an introduction.
Oh.
Yeah, we'll do a quick intro and then take it away. And then I can. Yeah. We'll talk, but,
Okay, question.
Yeah.
And this. Yeah. 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 So I just.
Yeah.
Like, I have done this like that.
Yeah.
Oh, well, we can try. Not.
Okay, how do you make it up on his screen when I chat? Oh, maybe that way.
This summer.
I don't know, do you know how to minimize it?
Yeah.
It was minimized before. No. What about the little arrow? Oh, well, but now let me put something in the chat and see what happens. It doesn't pop up. You just get you just see the numbers to get.
Yeah, that's fine. Yeah, this is better. He's more on the way. So we've got a couple minutes. There are snacks in the back. There's a sign-in sheet if you want to be on the list for future river talk. So we'll wait a couple minutes to get started. Grab some snacks and drink while you're waiting.
Almost done. No. Yeah. I get it. Fair enough. You know, you go with what you love.
Yeah. They actually went. Lost.
Okay. Oh, yeah, totally. It's easy. I can see by the plan. Yeah. Did you get to it? Yeah, just kind of like 20 years. Yeah, then you had to go up. Yeah, that's normal. Everybody relax. Why? No,
So obviously.
yeah, this is that whole.
No, we were watching the.
You might die.
Perfect.
Then you got to come here and look at it.
No, we gotta.
Oh, yeah. You're almost there. That's the day. Or I'm not.
And then there was like a, like.
Now-
Stuff and there was. Yeah, nothing.
Hmm.
And it smelled.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm sure I remember that. I should look at them.
Just wondering. I'm gonna take pictures, so everybody can take pictures.
Of course, yeah.
Basically, just post, it's sitting and you have. You'll need. No.
Yeah. When you find the unit, so. No, it's not.
Yeah. Yeah.
He's sweating and crying inside. Bro.
Yeah. All of it, everything's.
Yeah.
And
Yeah, we saw some. Yeah.
okay.
School in the jungle. That's.
Yeah.
It's really nice, right?
So there's.
Perfect. It's awesome, yeah. Yeah. Yeah, what's up?
All right. Hello, everybody, and welcome to the estuarium and our confluence room. I'm Kirsten Rude. I'm the stewardship coordinator here at the Lake Superior Reserve, and welcome to tonight's River Talk with Adam Swanson. River Talks are a monthly series, so every month we have a talk about science, and here in the St. Louis River or St. Louis River Estuary, hosted by the Lake Superior National Estuarine Research Reserve and Wisconsin Sea Grant. So welcome and thanks for coming out. There's a sign up sheet for information, or to get on the email list for info about future river talks. So if you are not on that yet, please go ahead and sign up. Snacks and drinks in the back. So enjoy. These talks are meant to be a conversation with people in the audience, and Adam has agreed. Feel free to chime in and ask questions throughout. You don't have to wait until the end. So if something comes up that you really want to know, feel free to ask in the middle. That being said, there will also be a little time for a discussion at the end. So please feel free to ask. And with that, I'm going to introduce today's speaker, Adam Swanson, a local artist who I think that many of you know or know of his work. And he's going to be talking today about art as a voice for science and some of the residencies and ways that he thinks about art and science. Show off some beautiful pieces. I guess I should also mention quickly, we are recording, so just know that that is happening. If you do ask any questions, and Michael is taking a few photos, so that's happening. We also have, in addition to some works here, Adam painted the mural over in the estuarium, and Mike Anderson has some prints on display for photos. So after the talk, please wander over there to admire the mural and photos. All right, with that, Adam, take it away.
Awesome, thank you. Hey, welcome. Yeah, well, thank you so much. I'm really grateful to be here. It's awesome, and it feels so nice outside. I can't help but be kind of a little bit extra happy. Yeah, I mean, I'm an artist. I'm a full-time artist. I live in Cloquet, which is sort of local, not so far from the estuary and the lake, St. Louis River. I paint every day. It's kind of like my job. I think about 10 or 11 years ago, I kind of made the switch where I started taking it maybe more seriously than just the hobby that it had been for decades prior. I don't wait for the muse to strike. I'm the kind of person who keeps a really regular schedule. I paint Monday through Friday, about 8 to 5:30. I have a young family, 9-year-old and 13-year-old. I live on the same. I have some property in my studio is maybe 50 feet away from my house or something. It's a glorified 2-car garage, but I go there every day. That's my commute, and it's yeah, it's lovely. But as you'll see, I've taken some residencies, and I'm a flexible artist. You know, I don't only paint Monday through Friday 9 to 5, but I do try to keep that time really sacred, because I've always felt that if I didn't chisel it out, I probably would never see my family, because I think if I just went with my natural inclination, I would sleep until 10 or 11, start painting for a little while, and whatever. They get home from school, and I just be kind of starting my day. So I try to really kind of be pretty regular. But I love science, and I guess I also love painting. I was an art major. I kind of tried science out, you know, in my schooling days for a number of times, but I always just kind of ended up falling back in love with the more expressive side of life. And the older I got, the more I realized that I can kind of combine those two things. So that's what I'd like to talk about today a little bit. Basically, what I'm going to do is show you a bunch of my my work and my experiences, and talk about some of the things I've done. And then also I have a couple other artists I'll just briefly tell you about, who are kind of in line with science, art, and combining the two in just different ways. And yeah, then we'll have some questions at the end. I won't ramble on too long. But if you have questions throughout, or if you want to get up and get a a snack or something in the middle, please don't feel free, please feel free, because I hope this is just kind of like an informal thing. And if I'm talking, you can just shout out a question. That's fine. So art as a voice for science. I was really lucky, I guess, when I was graduated from art school. I went to the University of Minnesota Duluth right after school to go to Antarctica, and I worked there for some years, off and on for a decade. If I was to smash it all together, it would be just over 2 years. But my first time was as I spent 1 year at the South Pole Station. I worked as a carpenter, not an artist at all. But I loved it. You know, I was like the only reason humans really are there is for science. There's a thing called the Antarctic Treaty, signed in the 60s. That basically said that anyone who goes there can only be for science, can't be drilling for oil or, you know, building, you know, too much ecotourism, well, there is some, of course, but it's mostly just a science place. And so even the people who go for a carpenter, like I did, it was science support staff. And I guess one thing that really struck me there, like having come out of art school, where I was an art major, and that was kind of in my blood and mind, was that there were all these scientists there that were doing amazing work, but like I had never heard of it. And I felt somehow like, how did I not know? It was 2001, and I think at that point, like I wasn't even sure that climate change was like completely, or at least in large part, affected by like human activity at that point. It's like a little embarrassing, but I think when I went there, I was like a little bit disappointed, like in myself, my parents, or my community, and then also like, why isn't this just something that everybody knows about? Because everybody at Antarctica was very clear, like, oh yeah, this climate change is happening because of CO2 in the air, and we're pumping tons of it up, and that's kind of not just because of that, but that's a big factor. And so that really struck me, I guess, you know. And so, anyways, I was just a working man, working guy. I ended up working at South Pole, and then went to a coastal station where the effects of climate change were even more severe, like, you know, like all the glaciers that have been there for tens of thousands of years were in severe retreat, and the penguin colonies, there was a lot of birders there, so people just counting penguins, you know, monitoring penguin colonies. And I helped out a lot. I was the boating coordinator at this point, and we just went out and counted penguins. There were certain ones that were doing really well, you know, like the adaptable ones, and certain ones that just like relied on these giant ice sheets, and they were doing very poorly. And yeah, it was just really interesting to me. Here's just a couple of pictures to show you that, like, this is the ship. I also worked on this big research vessel called the Lawrence N. Gould as a marine technician. Again, just surrounded by scientists doing cool research. I kind of started to realize like what it is for a person to dedicate their life to like science. And it's hard, and it doesn't pay that well, and you have to work really hard and spend years, you know, working on something that in the end, you know, might be scooped up, or, you know, that just might change again in another 10 years or something. So I thought it was very wonderful, and I loved it. So anyways, these are just some kind of pictures of me of Antarctic times, and to show you that when I did come back to Minnesota, I sort of had always regretted not spending more of my time working on my art. You know, I'd always just, I think at that point I was just working a lot and painting when I could, like in between contracts and in between jobs. And so I'd paint little things, like little snapshots from Antarctica, but never really sat down and tried to work hard at it. But these are just a couple of really early works that I did of some of the cool stuff that I saw going on around me. But they weren't really informed by anything real. They were all like a little imaginative or just like pretty. And I wasn't really thinking too much about content. You know, I was just trying to make like a nice thing that was that expressed, you know, something that I had actually had an experience with. So after living in Minnesota for a little while, I realized that there's all this other cool stuff going on here, and I had dug in my heels in 2009 and decided to really start painting more seriously. And that's kind of when I started thinking more about like the responsibility of scientists. Like I think that like there's sort of this I think there's like maybe like a bit of an obligation to communicate, and that was one thing like when I was thinking about what I want to paint about. I thought about my times in Antarctica and like the people who I would say like, oh, like what are you doing down here? I don't really even understand it, and they would hand me like their thesis, which was like 2,000 pages long. It's like I can't, I'm not going to read that. Like I want to, but I just can't. And that was something like I really admired the people and their mission, but I wanted to like think of something that I could do that would like maybe be a bridge, like not that I'm going to be like a bridge, like the bridge, but just like there are a million different ways to communicate all the cool science going on in our area, and in Minnesota and Wisconsin, like and the whole Midwest, there's just there's amazing stuff going on here all the time. And I still felt like maybe not everybody, or it's just not always really apparent just to the general public. Yeah, exactly. And so I wrote a small grant for I think $3,000 for the Arrowhead Regional Arts Council in Minnesota, and I got that grant to basically find some cool science projects going on. And one I found was the Spruce Climate Change Observatory in Bovey, Minnesota. I'm not sure if you've ever heard of it. It's amazing. It's this series of greenhouses. In each greenhouse, they increase the temperature and the carbon dioxide. I think it's like, I wrote it down in Celsius. There's one that's 0 degrees, one that's 2.25 Celsius, higher than average, whatever the ambient temperature is, one that's 4.5, a higher, one that's 6.75, and one, so anyways, they slowly, each greenhouse is a little bit hotter and a little bit more CO2 pumped into it. And they basically measure the effects of a warming climate with more CO2 in on boglands and spruce forests. And it was really interesting. And I thought, wow, this whole humongous thing here, like millions of dollars, go into this project. And I just thought it was kind of like right in my backyard. And it's okay, it's close to the range, it's right up in the range. And so anyways, I took some of that money to go up there and just like walk around, and it's all volunteers who work there, keep it going. And it's really quite amazing. And I was able to I took a ton of photos. I volunteered for a couple days. Very sci-fi, and then I made some paintings about it. And in the end, I made a bunch of paintings. I only made a couple paintings about the specific thing, but what I did was I tried to find other projects going on in our area. So this is the painting from the Duluth Water Quality Lab, the EPA, the North Shore. This also, and this kind of just kicked off my sort of interest. This is actually from here, the NER. I don't know if this situation is still going, but yeah. But yeah, I just basically what I did was when I had these paintings, I interviewed somebody. I like kind of wrote a little synopsis of what they were doing, and when I hung this in an art gallery, I like hung that information next to the painting. So like whoever came up, it was just like, this looks like it could be from a scientific journal, but this is the one's a little dry. But I think with the explanation next to it, it gave it a little bit more depth. And this was my first time trying to do this, so I was really just trying to kind of fly by the seat of my pants. I knew I had like people who were like would let me into their space because I was polite, But yeah, I kind of with that, then I got on the Blue Heron, which is University of Minnesota Duluth research vessel, and was able to make some cool paintings, some of that stuff. Basically just wandering around and not trying to be an expert. Like just like when I was in Antarctica, it was I was never an expert. I was never like claimed to be. I would never know as much as like the people specific, who have spent years, decades sometimes studying like a specific thing. Some of those long-term research projects go on for, 50 years or more. And so I guess I kind of I came to terms with the fact that like I will just be that person who just maybe makes snapshots and just tries to digest things like a novice might. But I do have like a love for painting. Like I accidentally fell in love with painting. In art school, I was a printmaker and a sculptor and a drawer. But the older I got, the more interested in just painting. I got more interested in just painting because it has everything that I like. So this, I kind of leveraged that into getting a residency on the RV Falcor, the research vessel, it goes all around the world, but they have an artist residency, and if you didn't know, there are residencies for artists, like in science places. Even Antarctica has an art residency, which is on my bucket list, but it's like really competitive. Werner Herzog got one, there's like a very high bar, and it's also very difficult. So, even to get to Antarctica, you have to, go through a lot of, there's a lot of red tape, I'll say that. But I did recently or in 2008, get onto this research vessel in the Pacific Ocean. They're studying methane release, also kind of climate change related, but also a little bit about outer space, because they're looking at how some animals survive without any direct contact with sunlight, because they just feed off methane bubbles and deep sea vents. And it was amazing. Like, I lived on this ship for 2 weeks, and I just painted a scientist scooping mud out of the ocean floor. Just again, or like kind of literal interpretations, but like for me, I could have done whatever I wanted on the boat. I could have just like sang everybody's song, or done some quick sketches or whatever. I mean, the beauty of being an artist is, at least in this capacity, not an illustrator. I'm not like, I haven't been hired to illustrate a bird identification book or something. I'm literally just on the boat to be an artist and to capture what goes on, like, through my eyes. Of course, I applied, with some of my other science work and with a loose plan. But basically, what my goal was just follow people around, with their permission, of course, and take photos, and then make paintings. And I have a couple of these ones here because they're small, and I still have them. In the dining hall of the ship where I worked, there was there were screens all over the ship. It just always had like whatever was going on. They had a ROV, remotely operated vehicle, that would go very deep. It could go 5 miles deep, and they had cameras on it and these robot arms that someone could control from the ship. And we got to watch it just like in real time. And so I would take photos of that and then translate them into paintings. And it was very meaningful, just like meeting those people and recording their stories. This kind of thing just goes like almost unseen to most people. Like most, there are a lot of money and time and effort goes into making these sorts of things happen, and they also affect the world greatly. But I think a lot of us don't really realize like how much cool research is going on all around us every day. And so my goal basically on this trip was basically just to capture what was going on. And then again, when I did end up showing these paintings at I showed them at the Exploratorium in San Francisco, and then MIT, because this was like a pretty well-connected organization. Next to each painting, there's like a little description, like what is happening. And this shows you a little bit about how I work, which I'll get into more later. But I do a lot of like photoshopping and like my studio is filled with like my snapshots of all things. I try to paint mostly from photos that I've taken, or ones that I know somebody who's taken, or some experience I've had. And so this is a sort of a photoshopped collage of a photo that we took from the shore, basically, or from a little ways away. And the Falcor was floating, and then that underwater, that's the ROV. That's just when it's on deck, but I photoshopped it out. And then some of the footage from underwater, and then I kind of put those things together, use reference to make painting. Sometimes I was painting out on the deck, just what I saw as fast as I possibly could. Sometimes it was a little more contrived, me like in that tiny little studio space, which I will show you here again. This was my studio. It was basically in the wet lab of this, like I would often have to move all my stuff, so people could like dump sea mud down the drain, and filter things. So, or pipette one thing to another thing. So anyways, these are just sort of some of my paintings that came from that. one thing that I loved about being out there, and this is probably true of any sort of organization, is that there's this like high level of creativity that comes out, like it, with scientists, like they're artists, truly. The people, especially here, where there was nothing, there wasn't like a science supply store or a Menards or anything. So like anything they built, they kind of had to fashion out of their own. They didn't have a 3D printer or anything like that. It was literally just whatever they could find around. And like, this guy built this crazy little thing that ended up going over 2 miles deep. But he just kind of built it with some stuff that he had, but then he sort of had to piece together, parts by pulling apart his computer and some other little water sensors and things. I thought that was just so cool. I thought this was really a real work of art. I snuck in just a couple of my commission and gallery type paintings to show you that it's not all like wandering around on science boats and traveling the world. A lot of my work is literally just in my studio painting things that people will think are pretty. But this was a commission. This was also like 6 feet tall and 4 feet wide.
Is it?
It's a personal one, I'm sad to say, yeah. He would let you in, he lives in Duluth, this person who's an avid sailboater and kayaker, the backside of Stockton Island. Yeah, totally, I've been there too, I kayaked there. But yeah, like I get like a third of my income really, if you're interested, is just like straight up commission work, which I don't do that much right at this moment because it's mural season, which is like the other third of my income. And then the last ones are like grants and, I'll apply for like to go on the science trips and things like those are me, like I'll spend a day or two applying to a grant, much like you might for any sort of research project or program or something. And I'll get some money that way. It's like where I've almost had to figure out the project before I do it, which is beautiful also. So most recent, or kind of recently, I started doing a series of like the endangered animals of Minnesota. And I think I'm up to like 19 or 20 of those paintings. And basically I just look on the DNR website and there's a federal website that sort of lists all the listed endangered animals, and it's more complicated than you think, of course. Like you can't just say like, oh, the monarch butterfly is endangered. Like some places it's doing great, some places it's not doing great. Though it is one of the newest members to the list. But anyways, I kind of like I had like some strict criteria. It had to be listed either on the DNR website or there's a federal one. But they have like a list where they're classified and somebody's done some research. And then I started painting just pictures of them. I have children, so a lot of thinking about my kids and their interactions with animals that I think are really cool, and trying to process the idea of like without being, like preachy or like explaining the actual literal meaning of my paintings, because really they're all just sort of choose your own adventure. A lot of my work has to do with sort of what future people will see, and things that we take for granted, really, like all these a lot of cool animals. And again, it's the artist's job, I think, to try to push the boundaries a little bit and not be super literal. And I think that's one thing I found difficult, like when working with science communication, is not to be like, it's very easy for someone to say like, oh, I need you to paint this because it's like very accurate. But sometimes it's okay, artists at least, to make a bunch of mistakes, like in a way that can be all right. So it's a little bit like taking the easy way out, but also I think it's important for one of the reasons art is a good communicator for science is because they can sort of play around and push and pull without people taking it quite so literally. It's like a little bit of it's like another way to like capture people's imagination. I'm not saying we should be spreading misinformation, but also that maybe if like the moth doesn't have the exact amount of legs or something, or the colors aren't exactly right. The artists like can have that prerogative. And I think that it only aids science, honestly. Like I think there's plenty of people who are really good at scientific illustration, and that's great, you know, like that's an art also. But I think what we need and what I look for are artists or arts who push ideas around a little bit as much as the actual literal interpretation of what's happening. So this is the Blandings turtle, a Minnesota native and Wisconsin turtle that I took a picture of at the Great Lakes Aquarium. And then I thought it was kind of interesting to think like, oh, that's like might be just a place where the last place where people can see, you know, like, instead of like out in a pond or floating on a log or something. And I brought that painting there. So I have that one. Can't remember. There's actually a name for that painting or a name for that of that turtle, like Harry something. I could be wrong. But anyways, yeah. This is the Dakota skipper. Again, when I show these paintings, I showed them at the aquarium, actually. And I had a little description of like what the animal was, why, what some positive conservation efforts that have been going on. And then that was it, you know, like I'm not, again, there's no real message in a way. It's just, it just is. It's like the paintings are just like singular things. I try to work mostly from photos that I've taken, or again, like I mentioned, from people who've given me them or I've asked permission. And here's a good example. Here's my son doing the maple syrup by my house, and then the Canada links in the back that I photoshopped in. And it's not even dangerous. Like there's like no, I looked this up several times because people always ask me. But there are like no recorded incidents of the Canada lynx ever harming any human ever. So, but it does seem menacing for some reason. I don't know why. Because cats are scary, I guess. But so yeah, here's the painting I made. You can just kind of see my process a little bit, you know. Start with an idea, endangered animals. Focus on the specific one. Try to think of like, oh, you know, this animal used to roam around, probably where I live, you know, like quite often. Again, this is my kids. I have a lot of those for some reason. This is I should have written this one down. No. I'll know when I hear it. I can look it up though, because on my website also I have a little description of the animal, what's when it was listed. This is the crystal darter. Just like a tiny little stream frog. A man probably wouldn't be, a person wouldn't really be motoring a boat that big on that stream, but Karner blue butterfly. Wisconsin has actually quite a nice program. And with this one, I had like a link to citizen science that people could get involved with counting them or reporting sightings. Because there's actually like a butterfly association in Wisconsin, very strong. And like a Karner blue one in particular, where like it's really easy just to report. Like, oh, I saw one in my backyard in the corner of 10th and whatever. So again, long-eared brown. I looked that up. I'm forgetting this one. This series is like probably 4 or 5 years old. Typing over. Wood turtle. Yeah. So you know, a lot of the reasons listed, at least on the DNR's website, for extinct animals is habitat loss. So I thought about building houses and stuff. You know, we need those houses. I live in one, of course. And here's a mussel one for all the mussel lovers out there. This is Higgins eye mussel. All right, so now I'll talk a little bit about my murals, which are also important about science communication because working with young people, like I want to get them interested in all of it. And so I recently did, or 2 years ago, I did a mural at my son's school in Cloquet Middle School. And we met with the Fond du Lac Gitagon group, and they have like this really cool food sovereignty program. And we talked about pollinators and local foods that can be grown and have been grown for, thousands of years. And basically, we had some speakers come in and talk to all the young people. We came up with this image, which we applied to the principal with, and the superintendent and everything, there's some hoops to jump through. But they liked it, so we began by painting on this material called Polytab in our hallway during the winter, so that we could install it in the spring or summer. Basically what happened. So basically, hundreds of young people learned about all these cool pollinators and local foods. And then we learned about gridding, like how to draw something really big. And then painting, and some young people were like really serious about it, like her. And some were just like, whatever, like to hang around and chat, which is fine, that's the best part about making a mural. It's kind of like loose rules, as long as you're not messing things up, it's all right. But to make a mural, it takes a little bit more than just like having fun and painting. So we had to like clean the wall like really well with a power washer, and then prime. There's just some process stuff, but I think it's interesting just to show you like how it works. And then basically we rolled those panels up that we had painted on a special mural material called Polytab, and we adhere to the wall. I mean, it'll last 30 to 50 years or more, if it's taken care of. And we all put it up on a nice day, and in the end, it looks like it's painted just right on the wall. And this also above their community or their little school garden where the students all plant stuff. And this is sort of like, it's science. Like this is it. Like you're teaching young people to like learn about nature and things going on around, and then that's it, I guess. Like that's it. So not all the murals that I made are like that easy. Yeah. That's Cloquet Middle School. Yeah. Yeah, it's a good school. I don't know. I was there this afternoon. I did this one at Lighthouse as a shelter for homeless youth in Duluth. I don't have too many pictures of the progress. This one was a whole different thing, not very science oriented, but I just wanted to bring it up because it was difficult, just the logistics, like just thinking about like this scaffolding, and just me and a couple people moving things around. It's like it's a very heavy lift, right? For the artist or any interested person. But here it is finished. This again, it was like the youth came up with this idea. We made a design together, and some people were really into it, and some people were like just hanging out, talk to their friends, which is fine. Like I think in the end, many murals can be a very community event, which is that's one of the best parts about art, about public art in particular. And you also get to capture people who are just walking by. There's not pretension of like having to go into a museum or a gallery, something. You can just like walk by and see it. You can formulate your own thoughts about it and then walk away. And then now I did a series of paintings for Starbase, which is like a STEM program up in Hermantown. It's for 5th graders mostly. It's cool. It's really interesting. But I did these smaller paintings, and they were blown up and put onto the wall. I'm bringing these ones up because for me, making cool art for like young people and with young people is very important. Just like any field like science, you might want people to come and like say, hey, science is accessible. Like anybody can do it. It doesn't mean you have to like know how to operate an electron microscope. Like you can just go and observe what butterflies you see in your garden for a number of days in a row, and that's science. And just like art, as long as you're like trying and trying your best, you probably get something good out of the deal. So here are the paintings I made. And these were actually printed and not put up. I did a series, like one was medical, one was about flight. They're kind of all a little bit different. One was sort of trades. This was I was lucky to work only, this is kind of during COVID, but, I talked with this guy, Ewan Reeby, his name is, NRI. And he was taking samples of all these beautiful diatoms in local lakes. And he gave me a bunch of them, and because I was really into tardigrades at this moment. And I had some photos of tardigrades that I had from somebody in the Twin Cities. And he kind of confirmed that, yeah, the tardigrades would eat these diatoms, like if they were in front of them. And so I made some giant paintings about them, and that's all. You know, this was not grant funded at all. It was just something that I did because I was interested in tardigrades. I think after coming off the endangered animals series, I wanted to do something a little bit more resilient. And tardigrades are doing great. You know, they're just fine. So, anyways, I did a bunch of these paintings, which again, it's just like collaboration. It involved like me, like reaching out to you and him being open enough to say, like, yes, totally, dude. Like, here's all my files of all the cool photos I've taken. And like a lot of times that's all like I'm looking for. And I think that's what a lot of people are looking for, not necessarily looking for. I mean, money is important, but usually if we're reaching out to you, we just want like fodder, or data, or photos, or something, you know, something to make. I mean, that's what I want. I want like something to make my art more rich, you know, and more meaningful. Because I can like go online and find photos, awesome photos, better photos most of the time of something, you know, but it's like really nice if you have like a connection with the person who took it or some information behind it. And that's what I'm always looking for. I threw this one at the last minute, but it's basically, you know, a tardigrade guy flying a tardigrade play on a bike. And the reason I put it up was because even though it's like not apparently very scientific, it has like this little touch of something that I think is like science related. You know, there's some clean water imagery in the way background with the water tower. The person riding a bicycle, which is, you know, I think symbolic. And tardigrade, kind of, you know, kind of a cool, resilient creature who depends on clean water, you know, and to me, you know, like that's what I get when I make this painting, but somebody might just look at this like, oh, I love old bikes, the end, you know, and that's how they connect with it. Making paintings is like making little snapshots, and you don't really have to, they're not too loaded, you know. I make maybe 100, 200 paintings a year, so like I'm not like Da Vinci and the Mona Lisa, you know, like worked on that painting for decades. Like for me, painting is like you make a bunch of them, and you know, you can kind of roll through ideas, and then you're not trying to like and capture like the ultimate truth of all of reality. The idea is sort of just to like take some cool, interesting stuff, try to do as much research as I can, and then push it forward. Not many people. Yeah. So I did sell one of those tardigrade paintings, but the other two are on my studio. Sometimes I sold the blue heron one to the University of Minnesota.
I really tried. That's just fucking fun.
No, it's fine. It's weird. I mean, it's a weird painting. Yeah.
But it was like, I didn't realize that, yeah. Yeah, that's the end. That's the end.
Minnesota.
Yeah. That's what I got.
Yeah, that's very true. And I guess like that is like a message that I do have. It's like it has to come from both ways, because this is me going on applying for grants to do work about science, you know.
Yeah.
There's like a lot of artists who would, but you know, the certain places like the RV Falcor, that awesome research vessel with the ROV, like they're looking for artists, and they don't pay you to be there, but they buy your hotel and plane ticket and food stipend, you know, like it's basically a funded awesome position. And like for a lot of people like who are paying their healthcare with their art, you know, they need that. So that's why that 1% for the arts thing is cool. And yeah, tardigrade, yeah, TARDIGRADE. I can send you 100 links. They're like microscopic animals. They're animals, and they live in like moss and lichen. They're also called water bears or moss piglets. they are around here, like they're literally outside right now, frozen. They can survive like negative 250 to plus 180, I think, degrees. Extreme radiation. They've been in outer space, like on the outsides of telescopes, and then brought back, like rehydrated and had a bunch of healthy babies. You know, they're really amazing little animals. They can, you know, they're not indestructible. They're actually kind of fragile. Actually, they're like soft and squishy, but like when they're in their dehydrated state, they turn almost to like glass. They can survive almost anything. Oh, nice. Yeah. Awesome. Yeah, they're definitely, they're a little bit, they've got a little pop culture thing going on right now, for sure. Yeah, but they're really interesting, and yeah, I think the interesting thing to me was that, like, oh, they're like around, like they're like in my backyard, and you can see them, I guess, with like some of the bigger ones you could see with like a very low powered microscope. But you know, the paintings that I was the images that I was working from were from like a really nice microscope, but they're quite small. There's this guy, Jamie's Germs or something. He's got a really sweet Instagram. He just like posts like tons of tardigrade stuff. It's amazing here. That's a different thing, but there's a lot of people out there who you know, post and follow tardigrade life.
Fun juxtaposition, the microscopic and neural.
What was that?
It's a fun juxtaposition, the microscopic and.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I think the first time I thought about that was I did a chickadee mural in Grand Rapids. You know, like a bird this big, but I think the mural was like 60 feet long and maybe like 20 feet tall or something. Little bird and expanded. But yeah, you know, the smaller you get and the bigger you make it, almost the more interesting. You know.
What was your location?
Well, I worked mostly at South Pole. I only worked at McMurdo for like a month and a half on my way to South Pole. But
Like a city?
it's months. So like basically, if you go to McMurdo, anywhere between like 3 and 4 months.
I work with people.
Yeah, who's that? Or do you know?
Oh, let's see. Of course.
Yeah. Yeah. That's it just depends. At the South Pole, like basically there are 3 US stations in Antarctica. One's McMurdo, one's South Pole, one's Palmer, and then they have some field stations. And South Pole, like you go there for either 3 months or the winter is like 8 months or 9, and there are no planes in and out for that time, so you're like really stuck there. And then on the coastal stations like McMurdo and Palmer, it's a lot more open. You can go for like 3 or 6 months or something. But yeah. Oh yeah, nice. Yeah, I mean, it's familiar, but again, it's been like a decade now or more since I've been. So yeah, so yeah, it's a very, very interesting place.
Big world, small
Yeah, there's a lot of Minnesotans there, just, you know,
That's good.
and Alaskans and people who can handle long cold times. Yeah, or not handle it, but take it well enough for it.
Everyone's equally.
Yeah, exactly. I'll just like highlight this project and then we'll kind of nearing the end, I think. But basically, this is like I titled this Water Science, but it's basically about wild rice restoration efforts in the estuary. And I talked with Tom House a lot. This guy who works for the Fond du Lac Natural Resources, very near where I live, and he gave me a ton of information, and we met up a couple times. But yeah, there's like this really great wild rice restoration effort going on in the estuarium. I think it's like, I want to say 250 acres they're trying to restore. Is that right?
It's changed a lot.
Yeah.
It's 13 that are approach to it, where it's focus on the places that are cancer, but sounds.
Yeah, whatever. Honestly, in the end, I was kind of inspired by the effort, and then even like this, I painted, the painting I made was about this effort, which was also sort of doomed. I mean, not also, but it was like, I love the fact that like people want to make this happen, so they're like really experimenting with a lot of stuff. And it reminded me about paint, it reminded me a lot of painting or any kind of artwork. So they wanted to keep the geese from browsing all the newly planted rice. And, you know, I think the most effective one seemed to be like actually just putting fences up. Actually, the most effective one was hire people to go out with kayaks and scare the geese away, but that's not effective. You know, you can't have people out there all the time. And then there was like an idea of putting real fences up, which was labor intensive, but also pretty effective. And then one of the ideas was to like circle these plots where they planted like newly sprouted wild rice shoots with cattails actually. But I think it didn't work that well because the cattails ended up kind of like encroaching and taking over too much. But that's like the kind of struggle that I sort of enjoy. I mean, it sucks, but it's like I think that's like interesting that people are out there and like really trying hard to like solve a problem and make things a little bit better, and also yeah, just make our area a lot more beautiful and sustainable and clean and healthy. And I think we learn things in these processes, you know, of course, like the painting, you know, you make a bunch of bad moves and you realize, okay, you know, I'm not going to do that again. And I think that's kind of what science is too, you know, you like try some stuff, it doesn't work, try something else, and kind of figure it out.
And where's this?
This mural is it's by the Eco 3 building. It's kind of behind, it's in a weird place, like 21st in Michigan. So it's like in an app. Yeah, Bend Paddle, yeah. Yeah, you'll see it. Yeah, if you're driving on Michigan to Bend Paddle, you might see it. It's the mattress factory. There's like a mattress store there. I can't remember what it's called. But yeah, I love public art. I'm passionate about it. Again, this is totally self-funded. I applied for a grant. I want to make a mural about water science, and then I got $6,000 to make this mural, and you know, involved a lot of research. You know, I had to go take photos and hang out with some people and learn, and then the act of making it, you know, took a couple months off and on, and then we had an awesome opening, and Tom came and spoke to the group, which was cool. It's kind of a weird, cold, dreary night, but I love this because it's sort of like we're talking about the estuary in front of the sort of idyllic version of it, and then in the background is the actual estuary. Like that's it, like right over there. Yeah. So yeah, I think like, you know, incorporating a little bit of like knowledge with some with art in general is always great. Last summer I worked at Trout Lake Station. If anybody knows it, it's Wisconsin. It was a very quick thing for me. I was more of a mentor for a young artist, but I just threw this picture in there because it's Wisconsin related, and I had a great time. It's also about water quality. My mentee or my intern was from the Lac du Flambeau nation, basically, and she was really kind of like saddled like between science. She was working for the Department of Natural Resources, but an artist like in her heart. So that was really an awesome experience, actually. I think to work with a young person who was interested in talking about art. And this is the only painting I made, but this is just these two people. Basically, we went out on the boats and they pick up weeds and things that were growing on the lake, and they would measure the health quality of the lake. Like, oh, if we found this, you know, such and such species, they document it. And every, you know, week for this month, or every like twice a week, I think they went out and they just picked them. They could kind of measure the quality of the water in the lake, you know, as other things were moving in, like milfoil, and some other things, you know. So it was a really interesting place. Also, it was a very high place, so like it was really clear, clean water. So it was very like everything from there went down, so there weren't that many invasive plant problems. But this I just made really quick in like the course of like half a day. You know, I went on the boat all day, took some photos, came back to the studio. With my mentee, and we made a painting. Here's my most recent series of endangered animal paintings. I'll just kind of roll through these. I don't want to go too long. I have my thought on, but yeah, I'm kind of doing a pollinator series now on some of the endangered animals. This is a federally listed endangered animal of Minnesota series, but I'm just kind of interested in some of the things that, again, not like I don't really have an answer. This is the spectacle case mussel encrusted in zebra mussels. And yeah, again, as an artist, I think just it's important to just be able to take some images and roll with it. And the cool thing about this exhibition, what I hope to do like almost forever, is have a talk or something beforehand, which I'm kind of doing now, but in this case, I invited Samantha Smingler, who's like a butterfly or a monarch butterfly. At this time, monarch butterflies have just been introduced to the endangered species list. And so she came and gave a presentation about like Minnesota's part in their migration and some really cool things about monarch butterflies. And she handed out milkweed seeds to everybody, you know, just like whatever, combine some art and some science, and hopefully everybody goes home feeling with like a little bit of power and maybe something that they can do, like maybe not mowing so much in May or at all, plant some milkweed seeds. And that was really cool. That was a really fun project. Okay, and then here's I just thought I'd talk about a couple other artists I know, like David Bowen, Minnesota guy. This is a project of his called Wilderness. He also went on the RP Falcor, that trip that I went on, and he made this these plastic bags just bob up. Basically, he took the data from, he's a data scientist or data artist, basically, kinetic sculpture, and he took the wave, like they measure the waves. The Falcor records all that information, and he took that home and he kind of made these little robot arms that lift these plastic bags up to go like right along with the waves of the entire journey of the RP Falcor for that trip. He was on there for I think 10 days also. And here's another one called Plant Machete, which is pretty sweet. It's basically a plant with these little electrodes hooked up to it, and they give off these signals that he graphs into like a XY thing, and the plant literally, there's a video which the internet's working strong enough I could show it to you. It literally, the plant is controlling the machete. Here's another one where he puts the plant on a drone, and the plant literally will drive, like he has like parameters, like you can't go out of the giant box, like a football field size or something, soccer field. And then the plant sort of drives it around. And I just bring this kind of work up. This is Michelle Fangala, who's a Hawaiian artist, also from Wisconsin though. She uses like recycled materials and just makes stuff. She's also been to Antarctica and done some cool things. She's a weaver, kind of very versatile sort of contemporary artist. But she just makes stuff like this goes to, she made a bunch of QR codes that go to like certain places like that, where all the plastics are coming from that are getting dumped into the ocean. You know, just like some different, that very like statement heavy work. Really interesting person. And I just bring these people up to show you that like art isn't always like drawing a bird for the Peterson Guide. It can be, you know, but I hope that everybody can also remain open to just having an artist just come and wander around and make it work, responding to a thing. But it is another way to sort of communicate things like that are heavy and way more complicated than an artist can grasp, or even that the average person can, to the outside world. And right now I'm working on a pollinator series, which is going to be up at the Art Institute on May 10th, if you're interested, 5 to 7. I'm going to have a pollinator expert, Patricia Thomas, you know her, but she's going to come and talk. She's an amazing person. And yeah, well, it's going to be kind of like the monarch one, you know, we'll learn a little bit about pollinators and what we can do. It's also in May, where we'll remind people not to mow if they can possibly avoid it. And that's it. That's my talk, I think. I think I'm done. Probably went a little over, but I do ramble. But if there's any questions, now's the time.
Can I ask something in the chat?
Yeah,
Okay, so this is from Emily, who says, great talk. And I'm just gonna read it verbatim. In your paintings and murals that you shared with us, often depict humans placed alongside animals, plants, and species. I'm wondering if you have an approach or a decision process for how to decide how large or small the humans will be represented compared to the other animals, and if there's a meaning of the size.
yeah. Well, again, like going back, like, do I have a meaning behind the size of things in my paintings? Not necessarily. I mean, of course, like I have my own meaning, you know, like I guess if the human's smaller, I want to focus more on the things in the foreground or but I do want to like nod and like bring attention to the other stuff that's happening. But, yeah, I mean, sometimes the thing in the background can be just as important and as important as the thing in the foreground or in the front, the biggest thing. I generally like to focus on just one or two things, you know, in a painting, and then maybe some other background stuff going. But like as a painter, I really like to dive deeply into one or two things for a little while. So yeah, thanks.
Any plans for girls here?
I have a mural at the Duluth Depot that I will be doing this summer. On the exterior, it's like the round side, not the historic side of the building. And that's gonna be all about local pollinators also, because I've kind of been pretty into that lately, and I have like tons of sweet photos from my friend Pat, and some I've taken myself, and I think, and they're also gonna try to have a little garden going there, so, but yeah, that'll be up probably June, July for sure. It's like a nice size exterior, you know. And then, yeah, nothing on this side of the estuary yet. This summer.
You feel like you have enough time to do your own research, on your series. There's something that you're really passionate about.
Yeah, no, it's a great question. I sometimes, do I have enough time to paint stuff that I'm just interested in? I think, well, first of all, like something I started a few years ago, which I've kept pretty religiously, is Friday Fun Day in my studio, where I still go to work and I work all day, but I don't necessarily time myself to a project. I just like paint what I like. And that's been like pretty successful for the last few years. So like, that's the time that I mess around and I really get into it. Of course, I would have more of that time. I would have like Thursday and Friday Fun Day. But generally, you know, finding time and is, you know, sometimes these projects like the murals and the public things, like they're really good, especially at this time in my life. They've pressed me to be a little bit better than maybe I would be normally if I was just in my studio doing whatever I want. And I think, you know, finding that balance is always a trick. But yeah, I do have a list, you know, of things that I wish I would paint, you know, or wish I had time to like really dive into. And again, it's just sort of about time management. Sometimes those things end up, you know, as part of my Friday Fun Day routine, but sometimes the list seems to be getting longer, I guess. Thanks.
We could collectively manifest for you that you'll.
Ha, yeah,
Do in order or so.
yeah.
What's your value?
Yeah, well, that's just it. I haven't never totally decided on like what angle I would come at, you know, because I worked at all of the stations over the years for at least a little bit, and even the research vessel. And so like the wildlife is really interesting to me. But also there's something about that South Pole that was really cool. There's like a lot of big telescopes and neutrino, square kilometer neutrino telescope, which is fascinating. And like a weird thing to try to paint, you know, like it's like you almost have to think very abstractly. So that's like really intriguing to me, and like figuring out like, but how would I, how would I do that? And again, when you're applying to something like that, for me, I would feel like I would have to have a pretty well formulated idea. I would do anything, like if an opportunity came up, they're like, hey, do you want to come down and paint a bunch of penguins and whales and plankton? Like, yeah, I would do that. But, I guess for me, just deciding, and then also like even as the artist, you have to go for a couple months. You can't just run down for a few weeks. And I think I'm not at that time with the age of my children and stuff to leave for quite that amount of time yet. But it's on the horizon. They're getting older. Thanks. Yes.
What's the application process like for?
Yeah, the application process for the artist in residency programs is varied, but generally, I'm on some email lists, which anybody can get on, like the Minnesota State Arts Board, for example, has like a really great, almost too thorough, but they'll always tell you like, oh, there's like a residency opportunity here or there. And that's how I find out about those. And then once you find out about them, you just have to apply. And unfortunately, that takes like a day, sometimes two, where you get together, find out what the residency is about. Like, oh, this is about science going on in the ocean. So then I try to gather my science that's somewhat water related imagery. You're only allowed to maybe submit like 8 or 10 images. So kind of have to whittle it down, make a nice cover letter. Like, this is what I would do if I had this full residency. And then your resume, your top 10 images, and you send it off, and then you just prepare to be rejected. But also you can make your own residency. Like I did, I've done a couple that I just wrote a grant for like with the arts councils. Say like, hey, I have an opportunity to go to. I did one in Sweden actually for 4 months, and I wrote the arts council and said I had this opportunity to stay in this art colony, and they didn't pay for the whole thing, or not even close really, but it was sort of like, you can get funding for residencies. But that was me. I reached out to my friends there, said, hey, can I have a studio space, a place to work? And they said yes. And that was a little bit more of a self-directed one. And they come in all shapes and sizes. Trout Lake, actually, our research station, has a residency. And like, if you email them 8 or 10 of your images and say like, hey, I just want to come and like paint about the cool stuff going on at the station, they would probably say, okay, but again, finding funding for that. Residencies don't usually come with a ton of money, but they come with like an opportunity. And so that's what the balance always is. Like, well, can I just leave for 2 weeks and not, not be making money? And if you can, you should do that residency. And sometimes there is like a small amount of funding to at least cover your some time and gas. It's always a balance.
Is like the vulnerability of I really feel about that. They were so beautiful. And that kind of so things that were, and just the way I felt about them, hurtful, is the beautiful thing. So and something I was thinking about is that now it's be a sort of soft. Curious how spends a lot of but does it get that to the creature that it is in some way?
Yeah, like, can I treat the lake as I would treat like a little endangered
Yeah.
butterfly
Yeah.
or something?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a great question. I would have to think about that. Yeah, it's like I think about that like Antarctica a little bit. like that too, in a way,
Yeah.
like, there's like, it's like seems so powerful and endless and huge. But it's actually like fairly fragile, you know, and a lot is writing. Um,
Yeah.
But yeah, again, it's like, it is like translating, like, it's almost easier for me to take something really small and like expand it. It's almost easier to do that than it is to take something really big and like put it in this like little, like little, you know,
See it,
thing,
yeah.
yeah, like that.
Oh, yeah.
So, yeah, that's, I think maybe like a body of work could almost do that better than like a thing, but yeah, that's a great line of thinking to do. Which is a lot of painting is just sitting and thinking.
Well, I feel like we could ask questions all night long, but it is time after, so thank you so much, Adam. It's great to hear about what's people closer to the mic.
Thank you.
It's great to hear about your work and what you think about and bring, you know, art into this space where we talk about science. And I know we've been trying to, you know, bridge some of those gaps and communication gaps, and talk about how there are many ways to think about science and learn about our place. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks everyone for coming. Our next river talk is gonna be May 10th, so it sounds like it's a busy and popular day. It's gonna be here at Rikers Island a little earlier at 6 p.m. Because it's gonna be about how and where to find birds in the St. Louis River Estuary with Steve Colby from UMD's NRRI, Natural Resources Research Institute. And we're gonna be going outside as well to look for some birds, hence the 6 p.m. start time. So that will be next month, so May 10th. Luciana, do you want to share anything about the birding, the other birding events coming up?
Yes, in partnership with the Friends of the Lake Superior. Talk at the little thing. Hi, in partnership with the Friends of the Lake Superior Reserve, Wisconsin Sea Grant, and Hawk Ridge Bird Observatory, we're hosting a series of accessible, welcoming events to enjoy birds together along the St. Louis River Estuary, called Everyone Can Bird series. And the first one is Saturday, May 6th at Boy Scout Landing over in Duluth. A lot of birds there, and the weekend before the fishing opener, so there will be fewer boats. Yeah, and that event is listed on the reserve webpage soon and already on the Friends of the Lake Superior Reserve page. And we are excited to have an American Sign Language interpreter coming and as a like pre-scheduled thing, so people who communicate with sign language don't have to like pre-request it. But also, if you know people in the deaf community who use American Sign Language and want to hang out looking at birds, invite them.
Great. Well, reminder to, as you're on your way out, put your head to get and admire Adam's mural in our kind of kids area in the estuarium, as well as Michael Anderson has some photos on display there as well. So thank you again very much to Adam. Have a great night.
Yeah.
Oh.
Do you have like the contact information? Yeah, I read it down. Actually.
Because, so
We have never talked online.
no, we should have. Actually, the thing is like, so I usually help out students at the Harvest Day School doing outreaches.
Oh, really? Awesome.
And I just have this thought that maybe that would be something people would like to come and join us. And well, I think they plan on doing one in Hawk Ridge next week. I don't think but all of those students at Never City are into science and they're all kind of like super into this stuff.
Yeah, I love that school.
Yeah, it's fantastic. So, but I don't know, like, so yeah,